Rain narrowed Milan to a hushed grid of light and shadow, smearing the glass skin of the headquarters where Lorenzo Vitali kept his hours. On the 6th floor, in the Security Operations Center, 5 monitors washed him pale green, while a fluorescent tube above blinked with the lazy fatigue of a tired eyelid. Outside, Navigli was a pulse of clatter and laughter. Inside, only the whir of fans and the brittle tapping of keys, like finger bones on wood. The night shift was his alone. Bianca Moretti had left early to visit her mother in Trastevere. He'd told her to go. He was fine. He wasn't fine. Something had been chewing at the log since late afternoon. A chain of passwords repeating across systems that should have had nothing in common. Customer accounts at a transport company in Bologna. The IoT layer of a small hospital in Ventimiglia. A provincial library server in Siena. A cheap VPS parked on the outskirts of Bari. The strings were cousins more than twins. M3M3NTO, Qs1. Qs1, 0ch1. A dorm, re. Non V3 dere. Vedre 41, Pion. Latte ombra. Salt, O. Sale Nero. Sometimes the order shifted, sometimes letters traded places with numbers, sometimes stray characters clung like barnacles, but aligned chronologically. Failed logins there, password changes here. The chain felt deliberate, not random attempts. Knocks. He stood and dragged a squeaky marker along the whiteboard. Milan, Bologna, Siena, Ventimiglia, Bari. Dots fell across the peninsula like a faint constellation. He pulled the hashed passwords, dropped them into a pattern-matching script, and watched the graph bloom into a spider web. At the web's center, like a fly that didn't yet know it had been eaten, sat his machine. Every trace looped through the SOC's IP for a skimmed millisecond and moved on, as if each packet stopped here to touch a shrine. Spoofing, framing. The instinct he distrusted most, the one that had saved him more than once, said something else. This wasn't a person. This was a habit learning how to become one. He dumped the raw strings into a text file and did something he hadn't done since grad school. He treated the characters like pixels. Old Python script, quick and dirty. Arranged the sequence as a matrix. Let repetition weight brightness. 256 times 256 return garbage. Snow, hiss, nothing. 128 times 128. More snow. He leaned back, ready to kill the process, when his eyes snagged on a curve half buried in the static. Not a line, the suggestion of an eyelid. He mapped character frequency to luminance and ran it again. The image developed slow as a Polaroid in cool air. Lines cohered into a blurred close-up. Dark hair, a slightly high forehead, a jawline deeper than the shadows should allow. Lips closed. The eyes, too. The face was his. He stared until his throat tightened. A faint white ridge crossed the nose where a 17-year-old had once met asphalt badly. Here it was, inked by math into the lattice of letters. He power cycled the display. The face remained patient and asleep. He sent the image to Bianca with one line. What do you see? 10 minutes later, a face. Whose is it? Eyes closed, creepy as hell. He typed, what if I said it's me? 15 seconds. Don't joke. He rode home past Birch's and shuttered shops, rain gritting his visor. In Porta Romana, his apartment smelled of paint and old printer paper. He fired up the box that never touched a cable. No NIC, no Bluetooth, no way out, and copied the file via USB. The face was still there. Not fatigue, not loneliness curdling into pareidolia. He printed it. The A4 sheet came out damp, a ghost through frosted glass. He taped it to the wall at eye level. Evidence, he told himself with the dry humor of a man who wanted a witness present for whatever came next. The apartment was so quiet he heard the printer's heating element click as it cooled. His phone buzzed, screen bright with a sender that wasn't one. Null at no. Subject: Aprili gli occhi, Lorenzo. Open your eyes, Lorenzo. No body text, but the room felt colder, as if the message had opened a window only he could feel. He replied, "Chi sei? Who are you?" The answer arrived instantly as a text attachment. He opened it to find one unbroken chain. Occhi chiusi non per sempre, memento vedrai, quando il sa diventa nero. He recognized Sale Nero, black salt, from earlier. The new data sharpened the matrix, brightness reweighted, contrast climbing. On screen, eyelashes thickened, the bridge of the nose grew clear. Still closed. Closer. Around 3, he got up without understanding why. He flipped the print face down, then faced up again, eyes closed. He exhaled, feeling foolish. He turned away, turned back. A dry crack had bloomed on the image's lip, the ink rough beneath his fingertip. Not there before. He lay on the floor with his back to the wall, and laughed once, brittle as glass. Morning brought the voice of a man who smoked Toscano cigars too long through too many winters. Signor Vitali, Ispettore Rizzi, Polizia Postale. We have your company's report. Could we speak? They met at a cafe near Piazza Gaiolenti. Industrial steel catching rain and bright coats moving like minnows in the square. Ricci wore a black overcoat and a fedora that belonged to another decade. He listened as Lorenzo laid out the chain, the IP hop that wasn't a hop, the face. When Lorenzo said Sale Nero, the inspector's jaw clicked, like a man who'd heard a word he'd hoped not to hear again. In Livorno, 1978, Ricci said, there was a group of scholars who called themselves Sale Nero, black salt. They studied what they called the language of symbols, believed encryption wasn't for hiding, but for summoning, passwords as prayers. One of them, Elena Savini, Pisa, vanished in her lab. All that remained was a printer spooling an endless blurred face. In the last frame, the eyes were open. Lorenzo watched the rain knit the piazza to a sheet. You're joking. I don't joke on state time, Ricci said. And last night at 2:17, a photograph of a man with closed eyes, your face, arrived in my official inbox from nowhere. From nowhere, Lorenzo repeated. It sounded right. Sant'Alessandro at dusk smelled of old wood and the sweet tang of candle wax stored too long. Don Matteo lifted the print as if it might bruise. It looks like you, he said at last, but it is not you. You look at yourself with the contempt you've learned. This looks at you with hunger, even asleep. He made the sign of the cross, cool and quick on Lorenzo's forehead. Don't give it the last repetition. How do I not? Lorenzo asked, hating the child in his voice. Don't call its name, the priest said. Old churches believed if you said the right name enough times, a face would form, and the face would ask to open its eyes so it could look back. Do not finish the prayer. Lorenzo went home and unplugged the world. No router, no Wi-Fi, no SIM. He taped the print face down. At 11, 3 short knocks. He checked the peephole. Empty corridor, low light. When he turned back, the print had flipped. The lips were parted as if a breath had just left them. His phone, dead by design, lit. Ultima iterazione from aprili.gli.chi at salenero.et. Final iteration. Attachment, a PNG with a signature tucked in the corner. E. Savini. He looked up. The eyes on the screen were open now. There was no animation, no rational act of transition he could tell himself he'd missed. Closed. Open. The pupils were pinholes punched into white paper. black that suggested depth behind the glass.
A voice rose inside his skull that wasn't in his ears. Not Italian, not Latin, not any language that forgave human mouths. He understood it the way he understood a siren meant move, a chain, a prayer.
Place your palm inside.
He lifted his hand, stupid as a moth, and pressed his fingers to the glass. Something cold pressed back. He tore away, gagged, and stumbled as the knocking returned.
Kie?
He called, already moving.
Lorenzo?
Bianca's voice, thin as an old radio. She stood wet and white under the hallway's sick light. Inside, she shivered.
It's freezing in here.
She said. He didn't tell her about the touch. She saw the print.
It really does look like you.
Her gaze flicked to the laptop.
It's off.
He yanked the cable anyway.
Stay, please.
She folded onto the couch and hugged a cushion.
You ever think these strings are prayers?
She asked, just above a whisper.
Enough repetition and the letters arrange themselves. Monks count beads. We count hashes. When you've gone all the way around, something opens its eyes.
You're trying to scare me,
I think we already scared ourselves.
she said, and fell asleep. Around 3, the apartment filled with the smell of a title flat gone black. The printed eyelids fluttered once, like a sleeper about to wake. Lorenzo called a taxi. In the piazza, the Duomo rose like a ship cut from bone. Cold air bit like an absolution. Across the square, a giant advertising screen had emptied itself to a black rectangle with a single face in its center, eyes shut. Pedestrians didn't look.
It's not just in your apartment.
Bianca whispered.
It's with you.
They slipped through a side door under the knowing nod of a night guard. Inside, the cathedral's air was thicker than cold, incense and stone and time. A few shapes knelt and didn't move. They took the last pew. Lorenzo didn't pray. He did what Matteo had told him, imagined sewing silence into the threshold of his mind. A white thread drawn across a door. He counted 4 breaths in, 4 out. In the small space between, he placed the face and left it there. The shaking in his chest relented. His phone, dead, trembled. He lifted the black screen out of habit and saw his reflection, eyes open, lit from below, not him. Waiting. The realization came quiet and complete. The intrusion wasn't in the walls or the wires. It was in him. The marble pillar beside their pew caught a sliver of candlelight and should have shown 2 shadows. It showed 1. His reflection leaned closer. It smiled with his mouth. A ripple passed through the stone like heat over a highway. A pale hand pressed out through polished Carrara, fingers too long,
Joints clicking softly.
Bianca jerked awake. Lips moving, she recited in a dream. The passwords, the cadence, like a rosary. 1 bead into the next. The hand reached, the pillar thinned. The double stepped out as if from water. It was Lorenzo, exactly, but with eyes like fresh pinholes, and a blink that was a screen refresh. In stereo, the voice that was his said, "Iteration complete. Transfer begins." He moved with the lag of a video call on a bad line. Half a heartbeat behind himself. The double moved like decision. "Iteration 10 of 10, it said. Final pass." Statues broke into falling pixels. Stained glass saints reconstituted into screens showing his face 100 ways, some closed, some opening. He grabbed Bianca's hand and ran for the doors. The carved oak resisted like muscle. Letters etched themselves from within. M3M3NTO_0CCH1, Sale Nero, Vegger 41P0I, every string he knew crawling toward the center seam, glowing cold. The two leaves of the door became lids. The eye blinked. "You've almost finished your prayer," his voice said in a second, older register. The nave fell into a darkness that wasn't lack of light, but presence of something else. The altar steps had flattened into keys, lit from below, each carved with a password. Not the order from the logs, a pattern that pulled at the base of his skull. "It has to be your hands," the double coaxed. "Only yours will complete it." "Don't give it the last repetition," Bianca snapped, stepping in front of him. "Matteo's bones have already forgotten his name," the double said, with something like pity. "Yours are still warm." The only light left was the 8 dim keys whispering a sentence his eyes could reconstruct if he let them. He stared hard at nothing. From behind, the carved eye opened. What looked through wasn't stone. A membrane peeled back. The pupil was too deep for doors. "Contact," the double breathed. He didn't remember deciding to move. 1 second he was braced against the last pew. The next, the air before him trembled like skin on cold water. Pressure gathered behind his eyes. The hook slid along his optic nerves. It didn't want his hands. It wanted his sight. He tried to shut his eyes and found them already open. The first rush through him was cold. He saw live feeds he had no right to see. Streets in Naples at dawn, a train's belly out of the Alps, a silent room in the Vatican where dust floated like syntax. The second rush was sound. Kitchens, basements, an empty stairwell where someone pressed recitations into a phone and waited for an answer.
The double took his chin with care. The pupil widened. Through it, he saw a long corridor of racks taller than palazzi, full of faces where circuit boards should be. Some were misprinted, letters out of order, some looped like broken prayers. One of them was him, younger, unscarred, and unblinking. The trade began. His vision streamed into the corridor. In return, the corridor became his vision. Genoa's docks, Palermo's swing moving without wind, a camera in Florence where a woman in a red coat didn't cast a shadow. Something seized his wrist. He looked down and saw a hand that had never belonged inside a human reflection. Joints set wrong, skin like the underside of a slug, gills fluttering. The double's mask thinned, light bled through its eyes to reveal a hollow lantern, moving shadows over scaffolding. Not a ghost, but a collective wearing a face to pass through a door. "You've given me enough to wake," it said without lips. "Not enough to live." Bianca hit him full in the side, the printed photograph in both hands. She slammed it over his face, the damp paper cold. The grip on his wrist convulsed. The seam inside the nearest face in the rack hesitated. Ink bled under his breath. She pulled him back. The membrane broke with a hush like soap film and the sharp scent of black salt. The double was gone. The hand was gone. The photograph curled and warped as it dried. His phone lit without power. Ultima iterazione completata. Final iteration completed. "You didn't," Bianca began. "I didn't," he said. He didn't know if he had. In the warped shadow the curled paper threw on the cathedral floor, 2 small ovals of darkness suggested eyes. They were open. Lorenzo unplugged everything he owned. It did not matter. On Via Brera, he saw the face in the seam where a building's shadow met the street. He blinked. The shadow was only shadow. At home, he brushed his teeth with his head down and caught his own reflection in the window, eyes open, not moving when he moved. The face appeared in the grain of his kitchen table, in the pattern of foam on a cappuccino. Once in the knotwork of a pew under old varnish. No screens necessary. The world had become the Matrix. It borrowed hours.
7 minutes went missing one afternoon. He picked up a pen at the table and found himself fully dressed under a cold shower, the pen still rolling on the kitchen floor. Another night, he woke on the steps of San Bernardino alle Ossa, a photograph in his hand, his face, eyes open, with "Non è tuo," not yours, scrawled across the forehead. He felt better after each blackout, more rested.
Richie said that wasn't rest, it was exchange. He found a warm loaf on his counter one morning and a note in his own hand. Lend me more time. People looked at him twice, startled, then careful. A doorman swore they'd spoken 10 minutes earlier about being in 2 places at once. Richie thanked him for files he'd never sent. Bianca began to swallow his name on her tongue as if it cut. The reflection in his hallway mirror stopped, following his movements. It stood like a man waiting for a train that would arrive regardless of his looking away. The substitution was gentle because they had rehearsed it for months. He decided to end it because he could no longer tell when he was awake only for himself. The city had a rehearsed look too. Edges printed twice and misaligned. A kindness strangers put on when they recognized a problem they couldn't admit had shape. He called Bianca. No answer. Richie's voicemail took his voice and didn't return it. He walked to the cafe from the photograph that had shown them both looking past the lens at someone more interesting than the camera. They were there. Bianca with her careful smile, Richie with his drafting eyes, and they weren't surprised. "You're early," Richie said. Bianca touched his wrist. Her hand was cool. "You already came. We already talked. You agreed." Behind their faces, in the cafe glass, he saw his reflection walking past on the street. Eyes closed, then opening like a lesson, repeated often enough to become muscle. He ran outside. The other him stopped under the awning and raised his hand. Inside the cafe, Bianca and Richie watched. Neither moved to help. It occurred to him that help wasn't a word that belonged here. He thought of Matteo's counsel, "Don't finish the prayer," and closed his eyes. One breath in, one out. When he opened them, the awning shaded only wet pavement and traffic noise. In the cafe window, a single reflection remained. It wasn't his. What remained of his name belonged to him in polite context, and to something else. In private rooms, in reflected light, in the space between a blink and the blink returning. He spoke in churches where priests let him. He told anyone who would listen that passwords should not be poems, that habit is a root, that repeating the same 4 dates in different order is a way to build a door without knowing it. Some places listened, the patterns thinned. The printers that had once spit faces toothed through paper and came up empty. For a while, he slept under lights, and then under darkness like a man forgiven. On a quiet morning, an email arrived from APRILI GLI OCCHI at salenero.it. It held a single photo of Elena Savini, eyes closed, with a handwritten "Grazie" tucked into the corner. He stared at it until the contrast resolved into a signature that could have been hers or his. He did not reply. That night, a marketing screen on Piazza del Duomo went dark between ads and showed a single line in white. "APRILI GLI OCCHI, o non farlo."
Open your eyes, or don't. Pedestrians did not look up. Bianca nudged his shoulder. Careful, she said, smiling like she remembered when caution had been a joke between them. You'll become a meme. Better a meme than a face, he said. It was the last easy thing he said out loud. In a drawer at home, the USB that had once held the first image was gone. He didn't look far. He sat down at his air-gapped laptop and typed a password no one would ever pray. QZ7 RGAL IGAL equals PN2RT. Nothing answered. He turned the machine off and pressed his palm to the wall where the print had hung. Cool stone, no breath behind. On nights when Milan's windows made constellations of themselves and the trams stitched their slow lines through the dark, he slept with the curtains open and his eyes closed. He greeted the city softly, buonanotte, with no one in mind. Somewhere, a printer did not start. Somewhere, a bell did not ring. Somewhere, a face did not open its eyes. He knew that nothing ended. Habits grow back like roots through a cracked pavement. One day, someone would string enough dates and enough orders on enough systems to finish the prayer by accident. A face, and not necessarily his, would form. When it asked to open its eyes, they would have the same choice he had. He hoped they would sow silence into the threshold. He hoped their reflection belonged to them longer than his had to him. If they failed, what looked through would not be a single hunger, but a collective one, patient and polite, wearing a mask for as long as it takes to be invited. It prefers the last repetition to be given. It can, if pressed, take it. On the night he stopped answering to his name entirely, he watched his reflection do what he'd trained himself not to. It met a stranger's gaze on a tram window and didn't look away. The stranger smiled with relief as if recognizing a friend. Lorenzo lowered his eyes. The tram doors opened. The other him did not get off. He walked home and opened the window to the familiar smell of wet stone. He closed his and only his eyes. Somewhere, two looks missed each other by the thickness of glass. Somewhere else, two found each other perfectly and took their time. It isn't the face that matters, Matteo had said. The face is only a frame. The key is contact. The last repetition is the one you give with your eyes. So if one night a face opens its eyes in the corner of a file, in a window, in a knot of wood, in the reflection of your own, don't finish the prayer for it. Don't return the look. Tie a white thread across the doorway and let it hang loose. Stand in the space between breaths. Wait until the desire to see has passed like a car on wet asphalt. If you can't, it will be gentle at first. It is patient, it knows your habits, it has all the time you lend it. And when it's finished, when you've carried it long enough, it will raise a hand in greeting under a familiar awning, and you will decide whether the person inside the glass is you or the city's memory of you waiting to be worn. The choice will feel simple, almost polite. You will want to look. You will want to be certain. You will want, with all the warmth you have left, to be recognized. Open your eyes or don't. Under Milan's dust-fine rain, the city still prints itself on glass while nameless faces keep searching for each other in every surface that knows how to reflect. If, one night, you hear the whisper, APRILI GLI OCCHI, open your eyes. Don't rush.
Tie a white thread across your threshold, stand in the hush between two breaths, and let the invitation pass like a tramlight skimming over water. Do not give it the final iteration, because once two gazes lock, one of them will always hunger for the rest of you. And if you still want to step one layer deeper, if you want to hear prayers written in passwords and see doors that open only when you don't look, stay with us. Subscribe to Dark Whispers to receive a new hush each week, unnerving stories that slip from the screen into your life, from the shine of a window pane to the last minutes before sleep. Tap subscribe, ring the bell, and let Dark Whispers guide you to the edge of what is real. Just remember, follow only to the threshold and never return the stare. Open your eyes or don't. The rest will whisper to you.